Hello everyone, my name is Rex Jerry of jerry.com and beginlinux.com. The title of today's lecture is gl.fedora.1, building a simple HTML5 calculator in Fedora GNU Linux. You can see this lecture in its original context at jerry.com/node/30. Thank you very much for watching my most recent tutorial, which was an Android tutorial. It was basically installing an Android development environment on Fedora 17. That video is both on YouTube and on Dailymotion, and I have basically about 400 views so far in about a week, maybe a week and a half. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this one just as much as you did the last one. Okay, the learning objectives we'll hit today. We'll discuss the history of HTML5. We'll discuss how HTML5 improves upon HTML4. We'll discuss markup language. We'll walk through writing the code for a simple HTML5 calculator, and then finally we'll demonstrate the calculator. The history of HTML5. HTML5 is a markup language for structuring and presenting World Wide Web content. It was proposed by Opera Software, the famous makers of the Opera web browser. HTML5 will eventually replace HTML4, XHTML1, and DOM Level 2 HTML. The Web Hypertext Application Technology Group, abbreviated WHAT-WG, began working on the draft of HTML5 back in 2004. The source for this is wikipedia.org/wiki/HTML5. Mozilla and Opera Software presented an HTML5 paper back in June of 2004. The HTML working group known as W3C started developing the HTML5 specification in 2007 based upon Mozilla and Opera's work. They issued a last call to industry for input on HTML5 back in May of 2011. The final revision of HTML5 will be finalized on an unknown date, but you can get updates at www.whatwg.org. And the source for this info again is wikipedia.org. Okay, how is HTML5 better than HTML4? Well, for one thing, you'll see in today's demo it has a simplified syntax. There's new elements that provide better structure. There's new attributes added to the elements that were already present in HTML4. Some elements have been changed to make them more useful. There's brand new APIs and a lot more. You can read more details about this at w3.org/tr/HTML5-DIFF. Okay, what is a markup language? If you're a college student, you use markup languages every day. And a good example of a markup language is when you take notes in class. You have your main notes in the middle of the page, and maybe you make little notations in the margins, maybe in a different color, like in red. A modern system for annotating a document that is syntactically distinguishable from the text is a markup language. So, to put this in English terms, imagine the text being the main part of your document, what you write in between the margins. And then an annotation in the margins, maybe in a different color, that would be a markup. So that's a markup language. Anything that's marked up where the annotations can be distinguished from the main text. So when you're taking notes in your computer programming class, you've created your own markup language. And the source for this is wikipedia.org/wiki/markup_language. Okay, so let's get right to it. Let's walk through our HTML5 demo. So I'm using my normal two-column format. I have gedit with two windows open, one with the program fully written and tested, and a new tutorial one that we'll use. So let's go ahead and copy our head first. And we'll go through our head line by line. Okay, as you'll notice, I said that HTML5 is simplified when compared to HTML4. You'll notice in HTML4, this doc type line at the top usually had a doc type and it had like HTML 4.01 transitional or DDT, something like that. HTML5, that's very simplified. The doc type is just HTML. So you do that with your less than exclamation doc type space HTML. Okay, next line is just your opening HTML tag. Next line is your opening head tag. Next line is your title. Opening title tag, and then your title and your closing title tag. I just called it Jerry Calc. And then your opening style tag, and then you have all your inline CSS. I chose to use inline CSS because this is a very small web page. The alternative is you could put the location of your CSS file and then put your CSS in a separate file. That's considered to be a better way of doing things, especially if you have a big complicated web page, but this is a very simple one, so inline CSS is fine. And then in that style tag, I have the style for the entire page, so all my colors, all my widths of all my divs, etc., etc. We'll see that in a little bit more detail when we continue on with this document. So then I close out my style tag and I close out my head tag. So now I'm ready for the body of the document. So here's our body. Let's go ahead and just get our entire body. And we'll go ahead and get all our closing tags for all our other parts of the document too. So we'll copy and we will paste. And we'll talk about it line by line. Now, of course, in my HTML, some of these spaces are not required. I just do that because it makes it easier to read. So this space after my head tag, I put that there so you can clearly distinguish the body from the head. So in our body tag, we have a brand new div. That's our title div. That div starts right here. We'll give the name title by putting ID and putting the actual name of the div in the quotation marks. And then I decided to call the title of my program Jerry Calc 1.0. Then I put a BR. This adds another space after the line. So the way you do that, the completely formal right way of doing it is you do it less than BR space and then a / and then a greater than sign. And then that's your BR tag. That just adds another space in the output when you actually see this on a web page. Okay, then I create a new form. The name of the form is SciCalc, short for Scientific Calculator. Okay, then I have an input box. An input box is created by the keyword input. I want to give it the type. The type is going to be a text box. The name of that input box is just input. I can call it anything I want to. And the size of that, or the width of that input box is 50 pixels. Okay, then I'm going to create a div here. I'm going to call this div button layout. And that's a div, that's a container for all of my buttons. This calculator has, let's see, 5, 10, 15, 17 buttons. So all 17 buttons are within this button layout div here, okay? I put another nice little space here. This space here, this BR space, puts a space in between my input box and my div containing my 17 buttons. Okay, then I have 17 buttons. A button, in this case, is going to be an input button. So I use the keyword input to define it as an input button, and then I give each of the buttons an ID. Now what I did to make it simple, all the buttons that are just numbers, I gave them an ID of number. All the buttons that are basic operators, like plus, minus, divided by, point, I gave those a basic operator ID. And you'll see why I gave them different IDs here in a second. And then I gave all of them an action to do on a click. So basically a number button or a basic operator button, when you click on it, you set the input equal to whatever the value of that button is. So if I click on the 7 button, I tell my SciCalc form to make the input equal to the value of that button, whether it's a 7, 8, 9, whatever. Now, the other kind of button I have is I have a clear button. So if I want to clear what's in the input box right now, I hit the clear button. So the on-click action for the clear button is a little bit different. The on-click action for the clear button is SciCalc.input.value equals nothing. It's blank. So that tells it to clear whatever the value currently stored in that input box is. And then the other kind of button I have is an equals key. The equals key input action is a little bit different too. On the equals key, when I press that, I call a function called eval. That eval function evaluates whatever is currently in that input value. For lack of a better term, I call it a register, like an input register or kind of a temporary storage space. So let's say I hit 7 plus 9, and then I hit equals. Well, when I hit equals, it's going to evaluate whatever is contained within that register at that moment, which at that point will be 7 plus 9. And then it'll say, equals 16. So I did that by setting the input equal to the evaluated output of whatever is stored in that input register at the moment. Okay, so it's pretty easy stuff. So hopefully what I talked about, it gave you enough time to write everything down. Okay, finally after the button layout div, I put a nice space to make the thing look pretty. I close the div. I close that form that was named SciCalc. I close the body of the HTML page. and then finally I close out the HTML. All right, so quick review. We declared our document type as HTML. We had our head. We had our style section, which was our inline CSS, which defines all the colors and widths of everything on the page. We had our body, which contained a form named SciCalc. And then finally we closed everything out. Now, one thing I didn't talk about is the different names here. I kind of started, but I didn't finish. So if a button has an ID of number, we define the color and width of that button with this number style up here. So you see this pound that says that anything that's defined by this, for lack of a better term, like describer or definer, anything that's defined by this number, which, all of these have the ID of number, are going to take on these characteristics in this style. So the background color will be whatever this color is. This is a hexadecimal color, so I'm not, right off the top of my head, I don't know what color that is. But every button will have a width of 30 pixels. Now, I also have a basic operator descriptor here. So anything that has that ID basic operator is going to take its characteristics from here. So it'll have a background color of orange, it'll have a width of 30. So that's how I give the different kinds of buttons different colors. The advanced operators, I don't have any advanced operators. I think I was going to put something there with an advanced operator, so that advanced operator descriptor wasn't used. The equals key, I did use that one. So the equals key will have a background color of whatever this hexadecimal color is, and it'll have a much wider width. So you'll see that our equals key is really wide compared to all the other keys. It has 132 pixel width. The clear button has a background color of white. FFF, FFF is white, and has a width of 30. So that's what I did. I was just describing the styles there. So now we've talked about that. Let's go ahead and save it, and let us go ahead and run it and see what the output looks like. So if I go into my Dropbox, I have the file right here, jerrycalc1 tutorial.html. Let's go ahead and open it up in Firefox. Okay, there you go. So let's play with that little calculator here. 9 times 9 equals 81. Now you'll note that equals, we set it to 132 pixels, whereas the other buttons were 30 pixels. So you see how much wider that is. Now there's a little thing in Firefox, I don't know why it does that, but it's a little bit shy of, the margin here. Whereas in Google Chrome, when I tried it on my Windows 7 computer, it's exactly the same width. So that's a little, I don't know if I call it a bug, but it's a little characteristic of Firefox. So let's say plus 56 equals, okay, divided by 9.5 equals. So it works beautifully. So there's jerrycalc for you. So in review, we discussed the history of HTML5. We discussed how HTML5 improves upon HTML4. We discussed markup language. We walked through writing the code for a simple HTML5 calculator, and then finally we demonstrated the calculator. Thank you for watching. You can watch the write-up for this lecture at jerry.com/node/30, and all the source code for jerrycalc 1.0 will be there also. I encourage you to download it, run it yourself, play with it, modify it, and I would love to hear comments from you. I'd love to see improvements on it. This was a very simple calculator, but I'd love to see somebody maybe convert it into like a full-fledged scientific calculator and post the code for it. Thank you very much, everyone. I enjoyed it. Have a great day.